All right, good evening, everybody. This is the Town of Richmond Water and Sewer Commission meeting, December the 2nd, 2024. Public comments? No public comments, moving right along. Additions, deletions, or modifications to the agenda? Nope. All right. Good, good. All right, first up, approval of minutes from November 18th, 2024 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those
This is
minutes?
Bart, motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second.
All right, Lisa, second. Any discussion?
No.
Okay, calling for a vote for approving the minutes from November 18th, 2024.
Lisa, aye.
Bart, aye.
Jane, aye.
Aaron, I.
Wigan, aye. Motion passes.
I didn't know you could fold your laundry and
Yes.
participate.
All right. Second,
A
yeah.
lot of weird. Just looks like.
That's right. She's helping her kids with her homework too. So.
Yeah.
Multitasking.
And then the next up, purchase orders. So we,
133.
that we have just the one PO number, yeah, 5133. Do I have a motion to,
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve purchase order 5133 to the Richmond Fire Department in an amount not to exceed $20,000.
have a second?
This is Bart, I'll second that.
Okay, discussion? How many miles are on it?
It was, I'd have to look again, but it's very low. I mean, there's almost no miles
Yeah,
on it.
that,
And I mean, we've had it for almost a month and a half now and it's an asset.
yeah, that is.
Yeah.
I was thinking like, I bet it's got like 10,000 miles on it.
Yeah, it doesn't have that many. It's just over 20, I think.
Wow. That's impressive. 15. Okay, calling for a vote to approve the purchase order.
Lisa, aye.
Bart, aye.
Jane, aye.
Aaron, I.
Wigan, aye. Motion passes. Okay.
And we took it over to the town garage and undercoated it and changed all the oils and everything and stuff, so. We're gonna, I mean, that has been done regularly ever since it's been the town, so. I mean, it should last for quite a
A
while.
long time, yeah, good. Okay. Calling for a motion to approve the warrants as presented.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve those warrants as presented.
This is Bart, I will second that.
Any discussion? I think there's 3 warrants are there. Is that correct? Electronic, okay, no discussion, calling for a vote to approve the warrants as presented.
Lisa, aye.
Bart, aye.
Jane, aye.
Aaron, I.
Morgan, aye. Motion passes. Okay.
Now comes the fun part.
Yes. All right. Get rid of a few things here.
Have you made up your wish list for what Santa could bring the plan?
Oh, yeah.
All right, so next up, first item for presentation discussion, A, consideration of approval of new policy and the amendment of current policy, which would limit each structure to only one town water meter.
Now, this is the 6th time.
Few iterations.
I had lost count. Thank you.
I predict 7.
Yeah, probably. Well, we don't know.
Okay,
Imagine that.
Josh, you want to lead this?
Sure. So as you guys have noted, we've talked about this a few times. At the last meeting, we talked a bit about trying to make it so that it's clear that if the building splits ownership and there's such that one side of the building is owned by one person, another side is owned by another person, that there's 2 lines, one for each side of the building. So there's a shut off for each independent owner of the building. We wanted to make sure also that we sort of there was clear language that made it, if you had an existing condition where you have multiple meters on one line for one building that's owned by one owner, we weren't going to force change of that type of a setup. We also wanted to make sure that if we did it this way, we weren't going to force somebody to change if they had 1 meter for 2 owners at this point. So I changed the policy. I ended up going with some bullet points to try to hopefully make it a little bit more clear. As this has gotten a little bit more complex, I find bullet points kind of helps me order things. We also wanted to invite Tyler Misha, zoning administrative officer, to discuss, how this might intersect with zoning, I think both for new construction as well as if there was an existing duplex that sells and now you have two owners, rather than one. How do we find that out and how do we enforce the policy at that point? So, where would you like to start? You want to review the bullet points? You want to talk about the theory of it? Heidi might be here to talk about
I'm
this.
sure she,
Um,
Heidi would like to talk about
we
it.
have Tyler online, so, where do you want to go
Start with Tyler.
first? Yeah, okay,
Short.
Sure. Tyler?
So, yeah, so what would you, hi guys, I'm here. So I guess I would ask, what questions do you have for me in terms of, this policy's impact on zoning or vice versa?
This is as far as planning and zoning or?
yeah, so I think some of the questions were, how do we get this policy to the customer or to the building owner? So I talked it over to Tyler. I think the first question was, if you have an existing duplex that's owned by one owner and then that sells, where you've got, say, sells one side of that. So now there's one owner on one side and the original owner is still on the other side. How do we know that? So that really wouldn't go through Tyler's office, just a straight sale. It's not going to go through zoning unless there's some sort of change to the structure. So that would probably be something where we'd have to ask the town clerk to look at that as sales came through. Where
Yeah, and not to farm this off, there's not a ton that I would be involved in. I mean, aside from permitting the actual structure itself, typically, this would obviously only apply to the water and sewer district. And typically when I get zoning permits, for work in the water and sewer district, if it involves excavation, typically that would trigger me to have the water and sewer department sign off on the application. And that would be the case whether it was a shed or a new home or anything. If it involves putting shovels in the ground, that would require the water and sewer to sign off. However, if there's something that doesn't require the water and sewer department to sign off on it, let's say a good example of this would be where the temporary location of the Northfield Savings Bank was across from the Richmond Market. That just recently went through a PUD process to add some more uses to the building. But let's suppose, for the sake of argument, that somebody wanted to switch that building to a residential use that was allowed. All they would do is pull a zoning permit to change the use. It wouldn't require water and sewer sign off if they aren't changing the actual layout of the building itself. As far as new construction goes, I see like some utility lines, but I do not have anything in zoning that requires me to requires an applicant to install multiple water and sewer lines onto a property. I would farm that out to water and sewer, and if they required it, Steve typically notes that in his permit conditions, and then I would add it to the zoning permit. But there is nothing that I am aware of in town regulations that requires multiple water and sewer lines on a property, and I'm not sure if I could enforce that on a zoning permit without changes to zoning regulations or public works specifications or something to that effect.
Okay, we got a couple of questions here, Jay.
The question I have is, I know it's never, if somebody wants to sell a piece of property and there's no changes being made to the property, zoning doesn't get involved. But if something is going from a duplex is going from one owner to two owners, and there's only one curb stop there because that's how the owner built it, how do we enforce that as a condition of sale, a second curb stop be installed?
Good question.
There's nothing in zoning, Jay, that would trigger that.
Yeah, that's what I was.
I think to answer what Tyler is saying and what we currently do, any construction in the sewer and water district zone that mandates a zoning permit has to come to me eventually, and I have to sign off on it. And at that point is when I put in conditions on what the conditions are. And what I have currently done, the one that I can think of up on East Main, where they, I made them go to the main and put in a separate curb stop. They were trying to subdivide a piece of property. It currently had a duplex on it and they were adding another house. And he wanted to just tee off from his curb stop because he owned all three. And I'm like, no, you can't do that. You need a separate curb stop. And once he accepted the fact that he was gonna have to do that, it was a no-brainer. He just did it. And then when they came with the sewer was a more complicated issue because he was going to feed the sewer from the new house, which would be a pump station, into the actual basement of the other house and then into the main to the, he was gonna feed one into the, it was a nightmare. And I'm like, no, first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna camera the sewer to prove that it's good. As soon as in the duplex, as soon as he did that, it was crushed, it was damaged. So he needed to replace it anyway. So he replaced it and put in a separate service for the new home. But those were regulations I put on him myself because that's the way it should be done, I feel.
Yeah, Bart?
Can you tell me, Tyler, you may not be able to, when the protocol for sign off by water and sewer started? Because I'm aware of events not that far in the past where it didn't happen. An example of a building was built on top of a sewage line.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that example, yes.
That, I believe that example is what spurred the sign off of sewer and water.
I think it was that as well as excavation. We
Yeah,
had some
any
instances where there was
excavation was-
happening and
Yeah.
superintendent
Yeah.
didn't know about that excavation. We have an excavation
It-
permit, part of that would, whenever you're doing new
Right.
construction, you need to
Yeah.
have that. And
Access improvement.
I think that sign off by water and sewer, is within the last 6 years since I've
Yeah,
been.
I mean, it's been there since I've been here for the last almost 3 now. But, and, I take each one case by case and assess
Awesome.
what's going on.
Heidi, were you gonna?
I'm just going back to the question that you're talking about. If the person is subdivided the property, then you would have to have a separate one.
Right.
Right, but
I mean, it's a subdivision.
But essentially, he is still owner of both properties.
Doesn't matter, it's subdivided lot.
So I think I just want to make this comment
Right.
now because this is what's been bothering me a little bit about this is if you have two owners of a property, then there would have to be 2 deeds to the property.
Mhm.
And that in effect would force the extra water meter or sewer meter, whatever. But in your example, did he actually subdivide his land or just?
I don't believe he did. It's
So-
separate parcel now.
Steve, if I could hear this, so this is complicated. So the property in question took advantage of something that's in the zoning regs in that particular district that allow 2 principal structures on one lot.
Right.
Where this is getting more complicated is that same property is, if it's the one I'm thinking of, is currently going through subdivision review at the Development Review Board to actually subdivide the property into 3 lots. One would contain the existing duplex, one would contain the new single-family dwelling, and the third remaining land would be common land between the 2 parcels in particular. It's complicated. It's a weird feature of this particular district. It's the only district that allows for 2 principal dwellings on one lot, two principal structures on one lot at this time. And so there was kind of a weird quirk that lets that happen. I don't know if all the VRN language that you guys are the new zoning districts that are currently working their way through the process. I don't believe that has that in it, but this particular property is grandfathered in and is allowed to have that use currently, but it's also going to be going away since the property will ultimately be subdivided once it runs through the subdivision process.
I mean, it just, Richmond's got to be like one, this wouldn't happen anywhere else. I mean, the legal issues of trying to because that's what a town could hold somebody to, is like, who's it deeded to?
Yeah,
And so I think in that situation, he probably should have been made to put in a whole new single water sewer system.
Sounds like it.
well, he was.
Okay.
I mean, for each dwelling, there is a curb stop, a separate line from the main, and there is a separate sewer service. But, huh?
One, right?
No, there's one for each home.
But that's what I'm saying is technically it's one property. Because
Right
he-
now,
Right, because he did not, so it sounds like there was a loophole,
right,
you know.
and he took advantage of it, but he was trying to take advantage of saying, I only need to hook T off from my curb stop to the second one, and I said no.
Mm.
And I held my ground, and he
Mhm.
eventually came around.
Freestanding structure.
Yeah.
And
And
just
I
to
really
be clear,
Didn't have anything to
that's-
stand on to do it, but
Right, okay,
Yeah.
no, that was good.
and just to be clear though, it's not a loophole, it's an allowed permitted use in the regs, so
yeah.
it's not, he's not skirting anything, it is explicitly allowed.
Right,
I think that's where the policy would help Steve be able to point to the policy to say,
Right.
no, actually, the policy
Something to play
says
around.
1 curb stop, 1 meter per structure, and you have to do that.
You know, it strikes me this is exactly what happens in terms of timing. What if I build 10 apartments? I own them all. And then I sell 9 of them the next year. Now I've got 10 units on one line. I have created a problem that now is very expensive to solve after the construction has been done.
Yeah, and that's, and that's back to Gary Bresser's point a couple meetings ago, is if he's gonna build a duplex, even if he's gonna own both sides of it, he's gonna put in 2 lines with 2 curb stops, because in the future, one side might sell. And it's not
And-
even a standalone building.
Well, also, if you want to meter both sides independently, that's what we're kind of compelling people to do. Cause
Correct.
if it's 1 meter at the front, we want we want 1 bill, right?
Right, so, yeah, so if it's a duplex owned by one person, then we want 1 town meter, 1 bill, and if they want to meter into, right, because that's where this started.
Yes.
I'm sorry, was 1 meter, 1 bill, and then if the owner wants to meter each individual unit separately, they can do so with interior meters, and then we started talking about if you have multiple owners, how you do that, and then we said, well, if multiple owners, each owner has to have the meter essentially.
but, I mean, to have multiple owners, they would still have to subdivide, I mean, that. Like, sort of
No,
like a
they want to
condominium.
so like the subdivision I think of as land, and
Right.
if you have multiple owners. of
Yeah,
one
we're talking
duplex,
structure.
Yeah,
Right,
And
but I
then
mean,
have-
so how do you, right, but
It's like condominiums.
there you go.
if there's, if
You,
it's. put
you
into
essentially
the condominium
create a
law,
duplex condominium.
Right,
You have 2 separate owners of the same structure. And the land is common. Whatever land would be there.
Outside the building.
yeah.
Heidi's nodding, so do we have it right yet?
No, you are absolutely correct. I mean, that's how it's done,
Mhm.
is like you were saying, like Gary was doing, is you have the 2. The reason I always looked at when you have multiple meters is because in my apartments, I might have the little old lady who is 1 person, and then I might have the family of 4 next to them. Well, it's not fair to have 1 meter to be split
Mhm.
amongst the
Partition.
tenants.
somehow.
But
So to make it fair, I have always divided everything. So they know they are only specifically paying for their use.
and what we're, as a town, saying is, that's fine.
Yeah.
We're not saying you can't do that. If that's your, as an owner, your responsibility, that's
Mhm.
fine. But if you have 1 line coming into that apartment building or block, then it's only having 1 meter that the town reads.
That's going forward.
And-
Yeah, it's up to
and-
you if your tenants
Right.
pay you.
Right, and
The town gets paid, but you don't.
Right, because you don't ever
Yeah.
put it on I know, you don't put it on the tenants, I'm fully aware of that.
Mhm.
well,
But-
it's not that we don't put it on the tenants, it's the owner of the structure.
Right.
So
I always
by
thought-
law, we can't go into the structure and shut off individual tenants for failure to pay. We have to shut it off at the curb stop. And if there are 4 people who own that building together and only one of them hasn't paid, my only alternative is to shut the curb stop off, which shuts off 3
whole
tenants.
building.
Oh, they'll talk. to each
Yeah.
other Real
No.
soon.
So I can't do that by law.
Right.
Mhm.
And that's why
But
we're
even as
asking.
Landlords, I mean, Bard, you might know this as a landlord. Can you even shut the water off? I doubt we could. As landlords.
I don't know, I got 1 meter and I pay
Okay.
for it.
But I'm just saying, I mean, I've always done it that way because I feel that's
Yeah.
what was fair for my single mom or the whole
Mm.
family or the little old lady that's living in the units of what is fair. They are paying specifically for their use.
And I'm not saying that's not fair to
It's cost
them.
more for me to do that.
Yeah.
And I realize that, but I guess I'm just questioning, and I'm gonna take it a little bit further. There are other properties out there that are saying, oh, I've only got 1 or 2 apartments when they've got more than that in the building, and they're only being charged 1 or 2, you know,
1 meter
fixed
fee.
rates,
Yeah.
yeah. And this, to me, would make them have to pay for what they really have in those buildings.
So one of
I
the
mean, that's
things,
where I'm coming from.
No,
And
and-
you're
and-
losing
and-
money.
and one of the things I foresee doing in the future,
Mhm.
once we have our meters installed, is then going through and doing a water audit for the town. It hasn't had one that I can even find records of. And basically, that's to find out how much water you're losing and how much you're using,
Mm.
essentially. And then at that time, I think we should, as a town as a whole, we should look into assessing every unit that's out there again. Because we have changed one just recently where the person bought the building. It was 2 commercial and 2 residential units. And ever since the person has owned it, it's been 1 commercial and 3 residents. And she's been paying a considerable amount a month or a quarter on fixed costs because it was considerably cheaper if she had changed it to a commercial, from the commercial to a residential. And she asked me to come in and inspect. I went in and we changed it. It is now 1 commercial lot or allocation and 3 residents, where it was 2 and 2 before. And then there was another one up on Main where they had too many. There was 5
Commercial, they were being built for, and they only had 4.
Right.
Same process. so we
and they're the
calculated
same
and
process.
did-
Well, I think as a whole, as a town, at some point, we should go through and really assess what the allocations are. I mean, it's quite obvious there are some that are just single, you know, family homes, and you wouldn't have to really inspect those, but then there are others where you know, commercial lots would need to be inspected and assess what the use is and what, you know, where the water's going.
Steve, question for you. What about a fire protection system, sprinkler system? Are there any buildings that you know of that
In
got
town?
Split, yeah, that have got split use? of
So
water?
there are, one building in particular has a fire suppression system that tees off of the main, and that water is not go through the meter.
Ah, okay,
Um,
okay. So it's
So
before.
my
okay.
question is, given the time, the packet has us looking at the policy controlling the number of water meters per structure and the policy for providing water to future development. And we have 2 separate motions, a move to approve the amendment to the policy for providing water and wastewater service to future blah, blah, blah. And another one for the policy control number of water meters. And we haven't looked at these policies tonight. We've just
Yeah.
talked about everything but. These aren't redlined versions, so I don't know what the changes are. But are we prepared to, is there some reason we shouldn't contemplate reviewing and voting on these?
Well, I think there was a motion to approve it, but there is one of them is redlined. still.
Well, so the one that's redlined is redlined with changes.
Oh, wait, I'm
to
sorry, I
the-
must not have scrolled.
Yeah, it's on page like what, 6 there, I think. So the one,
Oh.
there's one existing policy that does mention water meters, which is why we want to amend that to match the new policy when it's adopted or if it's adopted. So that one's redlined to show what we would remove, what we would add. The other one, I haven't kept a track changes versions going. I've just been changing it and saying, okay, here's the requested changes, commission. So I think on the one that only had, on the new policy, let me open it up. I think,
I apologize, I started scrolling going, this all looks the same, and didn't get to the page that had the redlining.
yeah, no, and so in this one, really what I did was I broke this out, like I said, into 2 bulleted areas. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. So at the time the policy adopted water, okay, so this is where I broke it out to say, okay, what are we going to allow to exist? Because initially it was sort of one line that said, if you've got a unit that has one owner and multiple meters, we're not going to make you come into compliance with this. But then we wanted to say, if you have a unit that has 2 owners and 1 meter, we're also not going to make you come into compliance. So as I wrote that out, I came up with a few iterations, and that's why we've got bullet points followed by 4 bullet points to try to make it clear that either way, you don't have to come into compliance. And if you're new construction, you do have to build.
If the property changes hands, we're not contemplating at that point, making them come into compliance.
I think if it splits, right, like if you own a
Yeah,
duplex and you
yeah.
sell one side of that duplex, then you have to come into compliance. But if you've got a duplex with 2 owners, and I think I tried to,
The second
Bullet
bullet
point.
on page 2. Yeah.
thank you, I
Yeah.
think I tried to, prohibit new structures from being built with, oh wait.
Well,
the
that's new
second bullet,
structures.
where's the second bullet on?
No, we had
Okay,
not.
it's the second bullet, mandate that an
Oh.
existing structure becomes owned by 2 or more
There you
owners.
go.
Where each owner owns a physically separate portion of the building. Each portion of the building shall have a dedicated water service line. Okay. So this, I read this one all the way through because it's short, but it looks okay to me. Is there any known, does anybody know of any problem with that one?
I do not.
I think it looks,
I mean,
it's
it's clear
clear,
up
I
the
mean,
flagpole, see what
and,
happens.
and we can always, we can always amend it next year. But
That's.
Let it
yeah.
stand on its own.
I
legs
mean,
as it
yeah.
happens.
Chairman,
And what-
I move to approve the policy controlling the number of water meters per structure.
This is Bart. I will second that motion.
Any further discussion? No further discussion, calling for a vote, to approve the policy controlling the number of water meters per structure.
Lisa, I.
Bart, aye.
J.I.
Morgan, aye. Motion passes. Okay.
And then the second policy,
Aaron, do a thumbs up or something.
oh. Aaron
I
vote.
didn't hear her. She might,
Aaron, did you vote?
she might have. bowed
Aye.
down. Aye, okay.
So then the second policy essentially takes, I think it's from each down to here, takes these 3 paragraphs, which is sort of the meat of the main policy, and drops it into here to say each structure that's serviced by the department shall have only 1 town meter per water service line. If the building owner seeks to have multiple meters, then they must be at the owner's expense and have individual service lines to the building. And then I added, if a building has 2 or more owners where each owner owns a physically separate portion of the building, then the building must have 1 town meter for each separate portion of the building, where each meter having its own meter service line. So we had that in there. The town water can be split to allow, blah, blah.
Yeah,
So-
internal plumbing beyond the town water meter can be split. Essentially, if the owner wants to have meters,
They have to have their own.
right?
Yeah.
But we're not gonna read it.
Yeah, and this one doesn't really have the carve out for existing structures because this is for new builds. So we don't need a carve out for existing.
And the town meter is the meter for the billing. It's not what the meters inside read, it's what our meter reads.
And it doesn't matter if the sum total of those
Right.
meters does not match ours over under, we have the golden record, which is the town meter. What I was gonna ask about is in that red line section, it focuses on water meters. we just heard earlier description of issues related to wastewater. Is that just subject to the approval of the water sewer superintendent?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think it is, but I mean, if I'm not asking you to
There's no way to contest
to
it.
keep spreading this longer,
So I
but
mean,
you know, it is a, I mean, essentially, in that case, I told him, look, you've got to prove to me that that line is good.
And it sure as heck wasn't.
Not
And it
putting
wasn't.
stormwater
And
in
as
there.
soon as he did that, he was like, okay.
Josh is looking for the section. It may be addressed somewhere.
yeah, I mean, this does control wastewater. I haven't read it. I can look through and see if it talks about that situation.
It's the preamble under that, near the top of page 6, number 1, the second number 1.
The second.
Each
number.
structure must have its own water meter and wastewater laterals. Does that, structures
go.
cannot share a meter or lateral? I guess that addresses
Yeah.
the issue, right?
Also
Yeah.
talks in offsite when you're putting in, talks about gravity or wastewater lines, but on page 5.
And they can't share. the
Josh,
meter
I'm not, can anybody see my hand being raised or no?
Oh, I'm sorry,
Oh.
Tyler, go ahead.
Oh, you moved.
No, that's fine. So I didn't mean to I just didn't want to interrupt. Well, just one thing too to also bear in mind is that with the zoning changes with the Home Act, and I'm still reading up on it myself, they're both the Home Act and Act 181 made a lot of changes to municipal zoning, especially for properties that are connected to municipal water and sewer. So one of the things to bear in mind is that any single family where you can have a single family home, you're allowed to have up to 4 units inside of the building. That's by right. So in theory, any home that's currently on the current water and sewer district, if they want to, by right, they could have up to 4 units of housing in there. So I'm not just sure. I just wanted to put that out there. I'm not sure if that would impact your conversation or not. But I just
And-
thought
and
I
we're-
would just share that before you got too far down the
And
weeds,
we're
'cause
not
it may
saying-
impact how you want to vote stuff.
We're not saying they can't. We're saying we want 1 meter for that structure.
So yeah, Tyler, we're gonna, and they'll have to, the individual that owns the property will have to put in individual meters for each unit there, if in fact they want to meter them separately.
Yes, right, yes.
Wouldn't it, my wheels are turning, thinking back on recent conversations about homeowners associations. So is it theoretically possible they could then sell part of these and the homeowner association pays the wastewater fee, and then they figure out how to do it? That's the bottom line. You
Yeah.
want one bill, somebody pays it or doesn't pay it. Everybody's on or
If
everybody's
it's not paid, we then turn that off.
And I was thinking that might be a loophole here that they would say, instead of building like more complex plumbing at what, $30,000-$40,000
Yeah,
potentially?
probably.
I just wanna we'll pay it all and we will manage it by some legal mechanism
And it,
past the meter.
and it's not a loophole, but you know, it is essentially, it's still a single family home, even though it's been divided into 4. And there's 1 meter and there's 1 person responsible for that
Are
bill.
we talking about a situation where there's one owner of all 4 properties? The same
Well,
owner?
I'm thinking it might be more than one owner at some point.
At
in the
some
future.
point, it could
Yeah.
develop into
Uh,
that. And that's, I mean, going forward, they're wanting density
Right.
Mhm,
and I'm trying to address how we get there and fairly,
Right, without sacrificing
meters.
somebody.
Eric?
Yeah, because this would fall into if they're just doing an interior remodel, the only thing they'd be coming in for would be a zoning permit. I wouldn't send that one to Steve, because unless they were changing the footprint of the existing building or had to do excavation out front for some reason.
Exterior work, yeah.
Aaron?
So this is changing the topic ever so slightly, but if someone is building like Gary and he wants to put the 2 curb stops in for the 2 units, if he does it when he's starting his construction, can he have 2 meters? If he owns both sides? If the
correct.
Yes.
No,
Wait,
No.
if he owns both sides of one structure, Oh, he has two lines. He
If,
can do it.
if,
Yes,
if
you're right. Sorry,
he
yes,
builds a duplex and he wants,
2 meters.
or has in the theory that he wants to, and he installs them from the beginning, when it is cheaper, you've already got
Right.
the ditch dug,
Mhm.
you know, you can put both water lines in the
Yeah,
same
you might as
ditch.
well.
It's coming in handy.
Yes, he will essentially have 2 meters for the same structure.
Or you could hold off and put another meter in later if you wanted to.
Yeah,
But
but I
that's-
mean, he essentially
That
would be
circle-
smart just to put it in at the start.
Yeah.
Mhm.
For the plumbing of the
Yeah,
interior.
you could put the- yeah, but yeah,
Mhm.
okay.
But that
ahead, Erin.
circles back to Heidi's point that if you have different people in your 2 units, you could meter them. If the owner of the building wants to meter them separately, they can, the little old lady and the family of 4, right? If it's new construction.
So if it was new construction, somebody owned the duplex, was the sole owner, they would then have to install internal meters and would be responsible for resolving any discrepancy.
Mhm.
Well,
But if
But
they
they-
have 2 curb stops, then they can have.
But
2
they
meters.
could, from the start, have 2 separate meters.
well, that's what you said. That's what we
Right.
understand. So they have the option,
For
one
the
curb
future, that'd be a lot
stop.
better.
And if
Yeah.
they wanted to meter them separately at that point, they'd have to do it internally. Or they could install in the very beginning, separate curb stops, one for each unit.
Mm.
Mhm.
Okay, and is that worded clearly in the document? I feel like.
I thought it was.
Yep, well,
Okay,
I'll show you right where it is.
Yeah, under number 3 on page
I was gonna
6.
say even up here, if the building owner seeks to have multiple town water meters, the water service line for each town meter must be constructed at the building owner's expense. And the water, which is probably the same line that you found in the other policy, because again, it was a copy paste.
perfect.
Any other discussion here?
Just one thing, I guess on page, not sure, page 6, can a building be like underage? Because it spells it a minor, I think.
Minor.
Barred poker.
Probably just something, underwater meters and connections, maybe you want to change it to where one structure is minor.
Oh,
Where
what,
is-
page 6?
In the public and 4A2, public and private system.
Oh, down lower.
Sorry, yeah,
Right.
Age discrimination, it couldn't be a senior.
it's,
Well, it's
You know,
probably a
somebody's
minor
grasping at
structure
straws and
versus the
grasping
main
at one.
structure is what
Yeah.
it means, I would imagine. I think it means like the main structure versus a minor structure.
Is that primary, secondary? Maybe.
Yeah.
yeah. Or
Yeah, I would
habitable-
interpret a minor structure as those, so typically how I would view it in zoning is it's a principal structure. If that's the main purpose of
or
a
accessory.
lot, so, yeah, so exactly, you would have like. Your home is the principal structure, and if you had like an ADU or a garage or a shed or something like that, that would be a minor structure. Or like an accessory structure. The only time we would have that in zoning is we have a minor accessory structure, which we're currently in the process of removing. But just so you guys are aware that that's how I at least view it from a zoning perspective.
So is major, minor acceptable semantics?
Principal. and-
You might want to consider accessory,
Yeah,
principal
Yeah.
and accessory.
it's more defined, it's well
Principal and
defined.
accessories.
I have a suggestion in light of time. Perhaps we got, I reluctantly do this, but perhaps go revisit just some of the semantics to make sure it aligns with zoning, principal, primary, secondary, whatever those are. I want to avoid the catch-22 major problem.
Major.
Salute or not, yeah.
Okay, good. All right, so we'll table this for the next meeting.
Okay.
All right. Moving along here then, update on water service line letters to customers.
They've all been mailed.
Got mine.
We actually revisited the service line inventory. We reduced the number considerably from the 165 because there was a lot of information that was missed. I collected it all up. I got the engineer to come up. And we got it down to just 92. And then even further, when I went through those 92, I found probably another 10 that will be removed. So we're essentially, as I dig into the finding the stuff, we're removing a lot of the information, but essentially the letters have all been mailed to the people that were in compliance with the state. I sent the certification in today. We mailed them on Wednesday of last week before Thanksgiving. So everybody has been notified.
Thank you.
And we did change the letter. You mentioned that.
Oh,
MSK
yeah,
gave
we
us a
did
much better, more
actually,
informative letter.
the, instead of using the letter that the, state has like as a blanket one, the engineer drafted a letter. It was very much he did Montpelier, Burlington, Barry, and he drafted a much better letter, better explaining. And so we used his draft, which is acceptable, and mailed those out.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next up, update on installation. Okay, no, that's, yeah.
You're right.
Yeah,
See.
water meter installation.
It's going slow because we just seem to have enough breakdowns and stuff to deal with. I think Brad said we're like at 153. We need a couple of weeks of not anything else but water meters to get us up there, but it just seems every day there's a turn. The septic unit is broken right now, so we have to run it manually, so one person really has to be there. The press is broken right now. So one person really we can run it, but one person needs to be there. So we're trying, but it hasn't been going this quarter as well as it did last quarter, but
You said the magic words, Brad Snow?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Our
This is
superstar.
impressive. I mean, it's one thing for us to think highly of somebody, but when the press does.
Yep.
That's.
That was the
Mhm.
VT digger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And Mike Coyle was on Across the Fence a couple weeks ago for his apprenticeship.
Good.
And they showed a bunch of pictures of Richmond, the wastewater plant. And we're also going to be featured in Treatment Plant Operator, which is a national publication
Mhm.
for the awards that we won this summer. They've called and done interviews with Brad and I. And then they're gonna come out and take a bunch of photos of the plant and stuff.
I was impressed
He
how
waiting to
deep that
take a
goes.
Certification test, right?
He is in the process. He did take it twice. He got very close. And now he is getting, he's trying to finish up his apprenticeship program, and he is getting some extra help for the grade 5 test. Vermont Rural Water, essentially, they don't have, or Green Mountain, they don't have a course for grade 4 and grade 5. Most generally, you get there by, over the years, you've learned enough. But they are seeing the need for it. So Brad's kind of in that limbo where they're trying to start a course and use him as a guinea pig a little bit to helping him learn and develop a course
Mhm.
for the future. So yeah.
Seems like it's very,
Heidi?
very well publicized. Really good.
Snow, I mean, coming in, doing the meters, he was fantastic.
Yeah.
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 He's definitely been
An
good
asset.
person, an asset for our community.
Should I bring up, I guess there was, we had somebody that was not happy about the installation.
Out of the 150, we have one disgruntled customer. We went into the home to change the meter. It was Brad and I. We changed the meter, turned the meter back on, the water back on and everything. And there was no water coming out. So the first thing we check is the check valve, the check valve that is our responsibility. And there was no water coming out of the check valve. The check valve was old and had failed. We, in the process of changing that check valve, and in hindsight, both Brad and I agree, we should have just said, your pipes are too flimsy, we're not gonna do it. You need to have somebody change the check valve, we'll give it to you, but you need to have somebody change the check valve. So I didn't want to leave a customer without water on a Friday afternoon, so we changed the check valve. In the process, there was like a foot long, maybe 18-inch piece of pipe that we had to change because it broke when we went to take the check valve in. We then put in the new check valve. We checked that the water was good from the meter to the check valve to the other end of the pipe that we installed, which went into their pressure reducing valve. Their pressure reducing valve had failed. That is not the responsibility of us. And I told the customer that. Before we left the premises, the customer's plumber had shown up to take care of the check valve. At that time, there was no water leaks to the check valve. The water was on, and when Brad talked to the plumber's like, wow, it looks good, everything's done. Looks good. He's like, I'll take care of it. We then were off doing other things, and we went back at 3:30 on the Friday afternoon and asked the customer, what, did you get water? Is it on? Because I didn't want to leave a customer over, I would do whatever I could to get a customer water. And she's like, yep, we got water. The plumber was here for like 10 minutes. He fixed whatever it was in the pressure reducing valve, and everything's good. So the Monday morning, there was an email sent that there was a water leak that developed in the piece of pipe that we put in, which was brand new, and that the plumber had said was okay and looked good, and it looks good in the pictures. And they had the plumber come back, and my feeling is when we left, there were no leaks. We have the water turned on, and everything was fine. Anything after that is the responsibility of the homeowner and the plumber. And we have to have a better conversation with her.
We'll be over there Wednesday morning, probably talking with her.
Great, all right.
Just for clarity, I presume if it's a new pipe, it's not the pipe, but the joint between the new pipe and.
It's copper, so it was soldered.
Yep.
But I'll tell you,
tricky on
we
those.
soldered it out of the home, so there was no, chance of fire. It was just a short piece. We don't have the pictures. It was just a short piece that we soldered. And it was soldered good, and the plumber even said it looked great. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I think she discovered the leak, sometime Saturday maybe, and it didn't get repaired till Tuesday.
Yeah.
So it was small enough where a bucket underneath it could suffice to control it for a while.
Good. Aaron?
So is the repair something that is fairly inexpensive for her leak, or is it a pretty big undertaking?
I think she's asking for like $175 for the plumber.
Yeah.
It's a couple pieces to it. I mean, I think she feels that she shouldn't have had to pay for the pressure reducing valve, but as Steve explained, they're finicky and they fail at times, and you need to get them adjusted. This is the first one out of 150 meters where that failed, but that is ultimately the responsibility of the customer.
Out of the 150, this is the first one that we've actually seen a check valve fail. And it was bad. I mean, the internal parts were floating around, and
How old was it? Like decades?
I would say, we don't even use that style check valve anymore. It was an old flapper style, and it was obvious. Once we shut the water off, the piece had fallen down, and as soon as we turned the water on, it came up and pushed. You could see it holding the water back. It made a good seal. It was just working in the wrong direction. So, that needed to be replaced, and we did it. In hindsight, if it happens again, I will say, look, I'm sorry. Your plumbing
Mhm.
is not good enough for me to, take apart. And I wouldn't do it, but
We'll just let,
I didn't want to leave a customer on a Friday without water.
no, that's good. No, just you and Josh,
Yeah,
sort it out and
Yep.
we'll move forward with it. Well,
And
we're
with,
short.
with
Go ahead,
half
Erin.
of the meters, with half of the meters installed, it seems like we do want to make right by this customer so that we don't have complaints hindering our next 150 installed would be my,
yeah, but in the same regards, I don't want to set a precedent where we are responsible for paying for a pressure reducing valve when it's not any part of our,
Nothing you supplied.
right.
Mhm.
And it's not in our, we don't touch them, we don't,
Yeah, I think I replaced mine once, the new, meters went in and our water started dropping off and replaced.
For, the historical record, when the new water tank came online and there was a bump in pressure because of the greater head, there was a recommendation to everybody who didn't have a check valve or a pressure reducing
reducing
valve
valve.
should have a pressure reducing
Yeah.
valve.
And since I've been here, when I get a phone call about pressure in a house, I ask them, have you had your pressure reducing valve checked? What's the internal pressure of your house? Most of the time they call a plumber and they get it adjusted or they have it cleaned or even replaced, and I never hear back from them. So I know, I've taken probably since I've been here 15 calls about pressure reducing valves.
Mr. Chairman, in the interest of time, we either could do a super duper quick superintendent's report, or we could bump it to the next meeting.
Do you have any pressing issues that we need?
No, just we've had some issues with the press. I can go through it real quick. We've had some issues with the press. We're probably will more than likely have that rectified this week. I have the part now and we can change it. We have the new one, but we have the whole new flocculator to install, but that's a 6-week process of being shut down, which I'm trying to schedule for after the first of the year. This is it's been like 3 days and, we'll be able to I ran it this afternoon for a while.
Okay,
So those are the only pressing issues.
great, thank you. Okay. That covers everything. Items for next week.
Revisiting, of course, the provision of water to new development policy, which we're gonna bring back for the 8th time.
Like the old Charlie Brown football.
I'm gonna miss this when it's gone.
hey, we got 1 or 2 field goals through today, so.
Yeah,
No,
we're
there, we're getting, making
it
progress.
felt positive this time.
What other, let's see, water, no, we'll have, water quality report next week, next. time.
Yeah,
We will.
so, yeah, I'll comment on that real quick. We've been struggling, our fluoride is rock solid. We're not worried about that. We've been struggling with the chlorine issue. We've been maintaining, but not quite up to where we would like to see it. We've had some problems with the pump and we feel over the weekend, we got it straightened around last week and, over the weekend, it's been better and we've been able to dial it back in. The reason we didn't have water numbers for you tonight was Endyne hasn't tested our last 2 fluoride samples that we took in yet. Their analyzer is broken down. And a fluoride sample is good for 27 days. So they are now sending out all of our, the 2 fluoride plus all the rest they have to, one of their other labs over in, Plattsburgh.
It'll be
And-
interesting to see if
and-
those numbers.
Huh?
Endyne has not been matching us very closely, right?
No, Endyne's closer than the state lab.
State lab is one that's always on.
Yeah, the
We need
state
to
law
move
is.
along, we need to move along here.
Yep.
So we can get close.
So that's why the
That's it.
numbers.
That's it. Okay.
Chairman, I move we adjourn.
As Bart, I will second that.
All right, calling for a vote.
Lisa, aye?
Bart, aye.
Jay, aye.
Aaron, I.
Morgan, aye. Meeting
Yay.
adjourned.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Maureen.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Sorry.